Two people graduate the same year. One becomes a doctor earning $220,000 a year. The other becomes a teacher earning $52,000 a year. 30 years later, the teacher retires with more net worth than the doctor. This isn't a hypothetical. It's a pattern researchers have documented for decades. And it exposes something almost nobody gets taught in school. Income and wealth are not the same thing, and the gap between them is where most people's financial future is actually decided. Let's be fair to schools for a second. Some financial content does get taught. Balancing a checkbook, the formula for compound interest, maybe reading a pay stub. The problem isn't that this information is wrong, it's that it's disconnected from how money decisions actually get made in real life. You can memorize the compound interest formula perfectly and still have no intuition for what it means to invest consistently for 30 years versus starting 10 years late. Financial literacy testing backs this up starkly. Research from Professor Anna Maria Lusardi has found that only around 7% of young adults demonstrate adequate financial literacy. That's not a small gap. That's a systemic one. And only a minority of U.S. states even require a standalone personal finance course to graduate. So what actually determines outcomes if it isn't the checkbook balancing curriculum? Let's go through the concepts that actually matter. This is the concept from the doctor versus teacher example, and it comes from real research, specifically the work behind The Millionaire Next Door, a landmark study by Thomas Stanley and William Danko that surveyed actual American millionaires in the 1990s. Their findings surprised a lot of people. The correlation between income and net worth is positive, but weaker than almost everyone assumes. The much stronger predictor of wealth is savings rate, the percentage of income a person consistently puts away and invests year after year. Here's why this matters so much. A high income with a low savings rate is a treadmill. Lifestyle expands to match income. Bigger house, nicer car, more dining out, and net worth stays flat regardless of how much comes in. A moderate income with a high, consistent savings rate compounds quietly in the background for decades and eventually overtakes even substantially higher earners who never built the habit. Nobody teaches this in school because it's not really a math lesson. It's a behavior lesson, and behavior is harder to test than a formula. Here's an uncomfortable truth. Compound interest is probably the single most taught financial concept in schools, and it's simultaneously the least internalized in actual behavior. Everyone can recite the definition: interest earning interest on itself over time, producing exponential rather than linear growth. What almost nobody walks away with is the specific, visceral, numerical reality of what a 10-year head start is actually worth. Two people saving the same monthly amount, one starting at 25 and one at 35, can end up with dramatically different totals at retirement, not because of effort, but purely because of when the clock started. And here's the part school curriculums almost never mention. The exact same mechanism works in reverse on debt. Credit card interest compounds against you exactly as aggressively as investment returns compound for you. It's the same formula. One version builds wealth. The other version destroys it. Nobody connects those two ideas in a classroom, so most people leave school understanding the math but not the stakes. School math treats risk as a fixed concept. Probability, variance, expected value. Real financial risk isn't fixed. It changes entirely depending on your time horizon, and almost nobody is taught that explicitly. Money you need in 6 months, and money you won't touch for 30 years, should be treated completely differently, even if they're sitting in accounts labeled with the same word: savings. Short time horizons make volatility genuinely dangerous. A market downturn right before you need the money can be catastrophic. Long time horizons make volatility mostly noise. History shows markets recovering and growing over multi-decade windows, which means short-term dips matter far less to a 25-year-old investing for retirement than to someone out to buy a house next year. Without this framework, people make one of two expensive mistakes: playing it too safe with money that has decades to grow, or taking on too much risk with money they'll need soon. Neither mistake shows up as innumeracy on a test. Both quietly cost people tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. It's worth asking directly, why doesn't this get taught properly? The research points to a few overlapping reasons. First, teacher preparedness. Most teachers were never trained in personal finance themselves, so asking them to teach behavioral money concepts convincingly is asking them to teach something they may not have internalized either. Second, cultural taboo. Money discussions are treated as private or even impolite in many households, which means the informal education that normally fills curriculum gaps, parents explaining real-world financial decisions, often just doesn't happen either. Third, and maybe most importantly, standardized curriculums favor content that's easy to test. A compound interest formula has a right answer you can grade. Did this student build a habit of automatic saving? Does not fit neatly into a worksheet, even though it matters more. If nobody taught you the version that matters, here's the compressed version, in the order it actually matters. Track and raise your savings rate before you chase a higher income. Even a modest, consistent percentage compounding for decades outperforms a high income with nothing set aside. Start now, not when you earn more. Time in the market is doing more work than the amount you start with. A 10-year head start is worth more than most people think. Match your money to its actual time horizon. Don't treat a house down payment fund and a retirement fund the same way just because both are labeled savings. Treat compound interest as a two-way street. The same math working for you in an investment account is working against you on a credit card balance. Pay attention to both sides. The teacher who retires wealthier than the doctor isn't a fluke. It's a predictable outcome of understanding these four concepts, none of which show up on a standard transcript. Subscribe for next week's breakdown of another money pattern that never made it into any classroom. Comment below, what's one money lesson you had to learn the hard way that you wish someone had just told you? I read every one.